So, Billionaire, soon-to-be independent presidential candidate Howard Schultz is continuing his tour of embarrassing himself throughout the whole country. The thing that frustrates me is that the only reason he's even allowed on all these major TV programs and the only reason he's getting coverage nonstop in print outlets is because he's a billionaire. So, Tulsi Gabbard, for example, has been running for president for a while now. Or she announced that I'm going to run for president. And she has gotten like 10% of the coverage that Howard Schultz has gotten because Howard Schultz bought his way into the room. He bought legitimacy. And that's what frustrates me, is that, we're watching this oligarchy, this plutocracy just unfold in front of us, and nobody questions the most basic parts of it. Like, hey, maybe he shouldn't just, by virtue of the fact that he has a lot of money, hop in front of the line and just get more coverage than almost anybody else who's running. I mean, Richard Ojeda was running for a while. He had to drop out because he wasn't getting any coverage at all. So, it's frustrating, but every time he opens his mouth, he shoves his foot in it. It's really hilariously dumb. So here he is. He went on The View. Now, you would think The View, they'd play, patty cakes and hold hands and sing Kumbaya with him. They did not do that. And he's so embarrassingly off about everything he says that he even gets schooled by Meghan McCain here. So look at this little compilation of him on The View.
That a Republican is going to win.
Joy,
and I know
I don't agree with you.
I know you don't.
I don't agree with you.
You don't.
In fact, not only do I not agree with you, but I think if President Trump runs against a far-left, progressive, liberal Democrat...
What if he runs against Biden? Biden's the middle of the road guy.
Biden hasn't come into the race yet. But let's finish. If he runs against a far-left, progressive person who is suggesting 60, 70% tax increases on the rich and a healthcare system that we can't pay for,
I don't know about
President
that.
Trump is going to get reelected.
I think if you believe in what you believe in, then stand up for that as a Democrat and then change the party if you feel like that, as opposed to going elsewhere. That was what I wanted to finish saying.
Okay. Can I ask you all one question? And maybe even the audience? Does anyone believe the current system, not only the president, but the current political system and our government is working well on behalf of the American people?
Not since Obama was elected, no.
No.
It's
I do think it's the best system
But I think
that
it
we
has to do
have.
with money in campaigns and money in politics. And you're a glaring example that as long as you're a billionaire, you can run for anything. And my problem with politics right now is the influence of money. And no shade at you, but you do have to be a billionaire to run as an independent. That's why Michael Bloomberg's the other example you've given.
Well, but you can't buy the presidency. The American people are going to decide. But let me just make one point. No. Can I make one point?
Sure.
With regard to New Hampshire and Iowa, watch every Democrat go to those states and have to be disingenuous and probably make a false promise about fentanyl just to be able to get elected in the primary in those states. I would have to be disingenuous as a Democrat if I ran as a Democrat, because in order to run as a Democrat today, you have to fall in line with free Medicare for everybody, free college for everybody, a free job for everybody. Let me finish.
But that's what you said you were given to your... That's what you just said you gave everybody.
But not the way, not free for the government. And that totals about $40 trillion on top of the fact that we are sitting on a $21 trillion debt in the country today. We can't afford to do it free, so it has to be a different way.
Here's why Howard Schultz might literally be the worst politician I've ever seen in my life to this point. And I'm not exaggerating at all. I mean, I honestly think even if you take characters like Mike Huckabee or Rick Santorum, who I totally disagree with ideologically, they had a base of support they were shoring up, and that base of support is fundamentalist evangelical Christians. So even though you and I hear what Rick Santorum or Mike Huckabee says and we cringe and we're like, oh my God, how does anybody buy into this? They have a solid base of support there, and they're playing to that crowd, and that crowd loves them. Howard Schultz has no base of support. The only people who nod along to what he's saying are, honestly, people who are socially liberal, but also working on Wall Street, and they're massively fiscally conservative and corporatist. Now, that number of people is so tiny. I mean, at least you have 20% of the country, maybe 25% of the country in the evangelical Christian base that Santorum and Huckabee are shoring up, and which is why they had some support when they ran for office. Howard Schultz has nobody. I mean, we're talking about 1% of the population who hears him and goes, oh, I think this guy's making sense. To this point, He's been running for a couple days now, like 4 days or so. He hasn't said anything about what he's for. Everything he's been talking about is what he's against. And what he's against is Bernie Sanders' philosophy, Bernie Sanders' ideology. And he doesn't even give good reasons as to why he's against these things. He's just like, yeah, we're against it, can't afford it. Now, by the way, empirically, factually, objectively wrong. And, I am so sick and tired of the media just letting idiots get away with saying things that are untrue because it's conventional bubble wisdom in Washington, D.C. So, I tweeted about it yesterday. I gave the exact study. It was a study from the University of Massachusetts Amherst that found that Medicare for All over a 10-year period saves $5.1 trillion. I used that study because that study is obviously more accurate than the Mercatus Institute, which was funded by the Koch brothers, which is libertarian-leaning. They say it's only going to save $2 trillion over 10 years. So, but even if you're taking that number, then at the low end, it saves $2 trillion over 10 years. So when he comes out there and he says, oh, there's no way we can afford this, Howard Schultz, you need to understand something. You're just wrong. It's not like, oh my God, let me put a spin on this, and let me just give you my conjecture, and let me just tell you my opinion, and I'm a business guy, so you have to take my word for it. No. We live in the age of fact-checking. We're able to look into what you say and match it up with the reality. And it turns out, Howard Schultz, you're just wrong about what you're saying. So not only are you not laying out a positive vision, but you're also just wrong about what you're criticizing. And oh yeah, by the way, everything you're criticizing happens to be wildly popular. The only thing he said so far about his healthcare plan, you're going to love this, is, oh, I'd sit down with all the industry leaders and we'd figure it out. So you mean you'd, do Obamacare? That's the individual mandate system. That's the right-wing reform that Obama ended up implementing with Democratic support and no Republican support. It was originally their idea, but they backed off it because evil, bad, black president guy eventually supported it and caved to their idea. So that's where you sit down with all the for-profit health insurance companies and you say, okay, we're going to leave you in control. You are a giant industry and we're not going to ruffle your feathers at all. And we're going to actually hand you over a captive audience and a captive group of clientele because we're going to mandate that people buy from you guys. So your genius plan is Obamacare, which was already implemented. And by the way, he doesn't know any of the details or any of the specifics because he's refused to give any because his entire time going around the country has been scolding lefties and scolding Bernie Sanders' ideology. So he's just terrible at this. Now, even Meghan McCain was like, listen, the only reason anybody's taking you seriously is because you're a billionaire. And he's like, well, you can't buy the presidency in the United States of America. And then the audience laughed. The audience at The View laughed. Lonely middle-aged housewives laughed at you, Howard Schultz. Why? Because even they know, and they probably haven't studied this issue deeply, but even they know on a visceral gut level, that's kind of bullshit. Yeah, you pretty much can. I mean, 93% of the time in Congress, the person who raises the most money ends up winning. And you're a billionaire. That's the only reason you're fucking sitting here. That's the only reason you're sitting there. If I had announced that I was running for president as an independent, would I have gotten this media tour around the country, going on all the shows? No. Nobody would fucking cover me. I honestly doubt even other progressive outlets would cover me. Well, by the way, I can run for president. I'm not of the proper age yet, but assuming I was, I don't even think the other progressive outlets would cover me. So this guy, with all of his money, the only reason he's taken seriously, he's like, oh, how dare you insist that it's because of my money that I'm being taken seriously? Okay, then I got to bust up another non-fact that he presents as a fact. He says, well, if Trump runs against the far left, well, he's going to win. And that's why I'm running. Because I'm afraid that if the Democrats are going to nominate a far lefty, and then that'll hand it over to Trump. Look at the lazy assumption there. First of all, if only we could, I don't know, maybe run your experiment, Howard Schultz, and have like a corporate centrist-y Democrat run for president against Donald Trump and see what happens. Oh, wait a second. That is exactly what happened in 2016. You had the corporate centrist, you had the neoliberal, you had Hillary Clinton, who's very much in line with you. By the way, Hillary Clinton wanted Howard Schultz as her Secretary of Labor. Hilarious. And what happened? Donald Trump ended up winning. If only we could run the experiment of how corporate Democrats do. Oh, that's right, we did. Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, when they were in control of the Democratic Party, they lost 1,000 seats. It's only now that we have this populist left wave that the Democrats started winning back seats. So They always, this is what you have to do. And it reminds me of the right-wingers, honestly, because right-wingers, what they do is they always act like they never implemented their economic proposals. When we've had their economic proposals implemented time and time again, we did it in the 19-teens and 1920s, leading up to the Great Depression. And we did it under Reagan, which led to a giant recession when Reagan got out of office. And we did it under Bill Clinton with the repeal of Glass-Steagall and George W. Bush with his rampant deregulation and tax cuts for the rich. And every time we implement trickle-down economics, we have a boom-bust cycle. But every time Republican politicians talk, they act as if there's no history behind what they're saying and that we didn't implement their ideas. Like, oh, if only somebody would do trickle-down economics, then this economy would be in great shape. We've been doing it time and time again, and every time the same shit happens, it's a boom-bust cycle. It's a mess. It's terrible. It's the wrong way to go. And all of the evidence says that, and they just ignore it. Well, it's the same thing here with Howard Schultz. I'm afraid that if the Democrats nominate a far lefty, that they're going to lose. The history is the exact opposite of what you're saying, Howard Schultz. FDR was a crusading social democrat. Okay, doesn't mean he doesn't have problems. Japanese internment and segregation still existed under him. So massive problems. But on economic issues, he was a social democrat. He got reelected 4 times. He was so unbeatable that the Republicans were like, holy shit, we need to come up with an idea like term limits, because if we don't do that, the country's just going to keep voting for these social democrats because they're good for the country and the people like them. So we have to like cheat in a way and come up with a weird idea to try to make it so that we get in power, because we're not going to get in power otherwise. If they keep running social democrats, we're fucked. So Bernie Sanders also is another great example of this. He repeatedly polls as the most liked politician in America. He also happens to be, in Washington, D.C., one of the furthest left, if not the furthest left, politician. That's not a coincidence, man. That's not a coincidence. But it's the lazy assumption, and nobody in the media calls him on it. Nobody calls him, oh my God, if we run a far lefty in the Democratic Party, that'll hand it over to Trump. The opposite is true. If we run another corporatist, it hands it over to Trump. All the data shows that if you run a far lefty, we're going to end up winning. So, and then notice he specifically goes after 2 policies there. Like, again, worst politician ever, because he says, oh, like the top 70% marginal tax rate, unworkable idea, bad idea. The free Medicare for all, terrible idea. He even, in a different clip, he even went on to say it's un-American to want Medicare for all. Dude, 59% of the country agrees with AOC's top marginal tax rate idea, 70% rate on all income above $10 million a year. 59%. And then Medicare for all now, it's 70%, including a majority of independents and a majority of Republicans. So when you go out there and slam these overwhelmingly popular ideas, you look like an asshole. And you're telling most of the country, you just called most of the country un-American because you said Medicare for all is un-American, and 70% of the country wants Medicare for all. And by the way, every other developed country has one version or another of a single-payer system. So when you say it's unworkable or we can't afford it, first of all, it saves money. But second of all, every other developed country has it. It's obviously not unworkable. It's the default. It's the thing that makes no most sense. So he's the worst politician in the world because he thinks that all of his, like, default rich guy opinions are just things that everybody agrees with. He's never read a poll in his life. He doesn't understand that he's in his own bubble and that, like, his money has made him massively out of touch. It just has. You know, because he has healthcare. He doesn't have to worry about paying the bills like that. We covered 2 stories on the last show about the disgusting disaster our healthcare system is. One woman getting arrested for fraud because she let a sick kid use her health insurance because he didn't come into school and he was sick and she was the school superintendent and she helped him out and they arrested her. You know, another one about an insurance company switching insulin makers, and then it didn't work, and so the parents had to beg to go back on the other insulin, which did work, and the kid almost died because of this dumbass health insurance company. Like, this shit happens every single fucking day in the United States of America. We have up to 45,000 people dying because they don't have access to basic health care. And his smug-ass, rich guy default opinion is like, oh, please, you want to, like, give everybody care and improve the quality of care and save money in the process? Oh, what a bad idea. Dude, you're a joke. Every tweet he's done, I'm not kidding about this, every tweet he's done to this point has been ratioed. You know what ratio is? It's when there's more replies than there are likes or retweets. So that means that people, whenever he tweets anything, people are just shitting on him in the replies and saying, fuck you, what are you doing? You're a loser, you shouldn't be running, you're a narcissistic, nobody wants you in the race, blah, 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 blah. So, and last point is the debt mongering. Listen, man, all of the debt mongering stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of economics. If you haven't yet, do yourself a favor and read a little bit about what's called modern monetary theory, okay? It's almost like a post-Keynesian economic worldview that's more of a leftist perspective. It's typically viewed that like Austrian economics is the right-wing interpretation of economics, and then you have Keynesian economics, which is generally described as the left-wing view of economics. But there's this somewhat new theory or school of thought, which is called modern monetary theory. Stephanie Kelton is one of the number one economists and promoters of this ideology. And go read about that if you haven't yet, because basically everything you think you know about debt is wrong, especially when you issue your own currency as a nation. So to think of debt like you would think of personal debt for a country, it's not analogous. It's not analogous because you as an individual can't print your own fucking currency. Whereas, if you issue your own currency, you can print your own currency. And what exactly is it that leads to hyperinflation, for example, or inflation? Why exactly is it that, for example, in Japan, they've been warning like, oh my God, there's going to be a debt crisis, and they've been saying that for decades now, and there hasn't been? Why? Why is that? Well, go read a little bit about modern monetary theory, and they'll explain it. But basically, understand that all the deficit scolding and debt hawks, their worldview is fundamentally based in a right-wing assumption. And that's why, you'll see very clearly every time somebody warns about the debt and the deficit, they never do it in relation to massive tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy. And they never talk about that in relation to runaway offensive military spending. They never do it in regards to corporate welfare for Wall Street and big banks. So they only trot out these arguments very clearly when it's about healthcare and education and spending for the people. That should be red flags right there in your mind. You should go, whoa, what's going on here? That's weird. You never care about debt when it's all these other things, but when it's for regular people, all of a sudden you care about debt. And Howard Schultz is fundamentally based in that right-wing worldview. And he's the classic guy who's like, oh, me? I don't hate gay people. I don't hate black people. So I'm obviously so progressive. But let me, debt fearmonger nonstop now. And let me also say how we can't have Medicare for all, even though it saves money and covers everybody. And we can't have free college, even though that would be barely the amount of money we increased military spending this year would cover free college and then some. So do you understand that? Not the entire military budget. Just the amount of money we increased the military budget this year would cover free college and then some. So he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about and he's dead wrong. But fundamentally, he has a right-wing worldview. And you might not know it. And he thinks he's like the billionaire who's going to save the day and he's the last serious man on the planet. Nothing could be further from the truth. He's an embarrassing figure and he's going to get utterly obliterated. There's really nothing else to say about this, but I will continue to dunk on him because honestly, he is one of the worst politicians I've ever seen. At the very least, you're supposed to dress up your disagreement with wildly popular policies. He's not doing it. And he's not even saying anything he's for. He's just, I'm against this and I'm against this. I'm against anything that the American people want. Vote for me. You're about to get a rude awakening, son.